Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Contemporary World course. Okay, so as I've said, we are actually running on our sixth week, and included in your week 6 to 7 topics is the North and the South. This is actually the subject immediately after your prelim examination. So at the end of this module, you are expected to understand the North-South divide, know the concept of the three-world model, learn the relationship of the three world in the 21st century. But for today, I hope you could squeeze in the North and the South divide. And for your assignment, you shall be working on with the concept of the three-world model and the relationship of the three world in the 21st century. Reading materials are available, and I want you to read all the reference materials for you to fully understand and meet the expectations for this module. Will that be okay? We only have 1 hour for today, and less than 1 hour, so I shall be discussing the first point, the North and the South divide. Okay, so what is the North and the South divide? So the North-South divide is a socio-economic and political categorization of countries. So it doesn't matter if that country belongs to the southern portion of the globe, for as long as it falls on the socio-economic and political categorization of countries grouped as the North and the South. So during the Cold War era, the Cold War era generalization places countries in two distinct groups, the North and the South. Okay, so after this, I want you um, to view the world map and see one by one those countries that belong to the South and those countries that belong to the North. So based on this, on the description, the North is comprised of all first world countries and most second world countries, while the South is comprised of third world countries. So if I would ask you, where does the Philippines belong? This categorization ignores the geographic position of the countries, with some countries in the southern hemisphere, such as New Zealand and Australia, being labeled as part of the North. So as I was telling you a while ago, it doesn't matter or where part or of which hemisphere these countries are located, for as long as they fall on the category of the socioeconomic and the political status um, that describes the North and the South countries. So, as per the history, the origin of dividing countries into the North and South divide arose during the Cold War of the mid 20th century. So, for now, I want you to take the note of the Cold War history, and I want you to search on the details of what transpired during the Cold War. So, sinasabi that during this time, countries were primarily categorized according to their alignment between the Russian East and the American East. Okay? Countries in the East, like the Soviet Union and China, which became classified as second world countries. In the West, however, the United States and its allies were labeled as first world countries. So based on the points discussed a while ago and while working on with the history, I think you should have a hint of if the Philippines is included in the north or its Philippines is included in the south. So this division left out many countries which were poorer than the first world and the second world countries. Okay, the poor countries were eventually labeled as third world countries. This categorization was later abandoned after the second world countries joined the first world countries. So yes, in the history, um, and for now, during this time, you wouldn't have thought of or you wouldn't have heard of much of the first and first or second world countries or third world countries because later on labeling was not true or at this point in time it's not true anymore, and later on we shall be discussing um, how they are called, these countries are how they are called, instead of calling them first, third, and second world countries. So a new criteria was established to categorize countries, which was named the North-South divide, where first world countries were known as the North, while third world countries comprised the South. So moving on, no? um, as per the description a while ago, the North Hemisphere countries are called the first world countries, and um, how they were categorized, why they are called the first world countries. And a while ago, we have a hint that these countries are the rich countries. That's why they're called the first world countries. And the third world countries are the countries which, in terms of economic stability, they will label as poor countries. So here it is. The first world countries, the north of the divide is comprised of countries which have developed economies and account for over 90% of all manufacturing industries in the world. Meaning, can you thought of that 90% of the manufacturing industries in the world? They um, as per the number and as per the figure, they almost monopolize the manufacturing industries in the world. Reason that they have a stable economy. Although these countries account for only one quarter of the total globe population, they control 80% of the total income earned around the world. So again, looking at the figure, um, this 80% of the total income earned around the world really says a lot in this, and we could really say that they are really the progressive or the rich countries, no? All the members of the G8 come from the North, as well as four permanent members of the UN Security Council. Okay, can you jot this down? So number one is the Cold War. You have to search on the Cold War events. G8, can you write it down? And the UN Security Council. So you have so much to research on. So about 95% of the population in the countries in the north have enough basic needs and have access to functioning education systems. Really, the first world countries are rich countries. Because can you again look at the figure of the 95% of the population? They have enough basic needs. They don't say they meet the basic needs, but they say they have enough basic needs and have access to functioning education systems. Countries comprising the North include, so look at these countries, huh? The United States of America, Canada, all countries in Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, as well as the developed countries in Asia, such as Japan and South Korea. So again, once again, it doesn't matter if you fall on the north and the north or the southern hemisphere, for as long as you fall on the category of, with the advanced economy and you have basic needs. They have the basic needs and enough basic needs, and they have access to the education system. Then you are now um, categorized as a first world country. Okay, so as we were discussing, it doesn't matter where these countries are located, whether in the northern or the northern or southern hemisphere, for as long as they they suffice the category for the economic status of that country. So again, you have your list of countries of the first world countries, and then more or less you would have a gist of or a hint where the Philippines belong. So then the South, the third world countries. The South is composed of countries which developing economies, which were initially referred to as third world countries during the Cold War. An important characteristic of countries in the South is the relatively low GDP and the high populations. Can you think of a country with a high population? Which country is most populated now? The third
China,
one,
ma'am.
yeah, China. That's right, China. But China belongs to what? China is not referred to as a first
Asia.
world country. Yes, it's not referred to as a first world country as per the description. Okay. So again, can you thought of another thing, another country, which definitely falls in the third world countries because of its population?
India.
Yeah, that's right, India. That's good. So the third world countries accounts for only a fifth of the globally earned income, but accounts for over three-quarters of the global population. Again, look at the figure a while ago. They were talking of the 95% manufacturing um, manufacturing industries covered by the first world country, and 80% of the income were were from the first world countries. And look at this figure. The third world countries accounts for only fifth of the globally earned income and accounts for over three-quarters of the global population. So you can just imagine the status, and without saying it so, meaning probably and most likely they do not meet the basic needs and then the education system. Yes, another common characteristic of the countries in the south is lack of basic amenities. We are correct. As little as 5% of the population is able to access basic needs such as food and shelter, as compared to 80% of the first world countries. The economies of most countries in the south rely on um, imports from the north and how low technological penetration. Yes, yes, definitely, because as per description, 95% of the manufacturing firms came from the developing countries or the first world countries. That's why mostly the south countries or the south or the third world countries really rely only on the imports from those developing countries. So the countries making up the south are mainly drawn from Africa, South America, and Asia, with all African and South American countries being from the south. The only Asian countries not from the south are again Japan and South Korea. So when everything gets normal, I want you to visit South Korea. Why? I want you to visit South Korea, not only because of the K dramas, but because you would like the cold weather, but definitely you would really feel that it is as if that you are in the United States of America because of their transport system. By how um, people live, and you would just really see that they are really, they deserve to be in the first world countries category. So the first world, second world, and third world countries are products of the three world model. Okay, jot it down. Pang ilan na to? So you have Cold War, you have G8, you have UN Security Council. Okay, number four, the three world model. I want you to read on this, a concept that grouped all of the countries, world's countries into three groups. So ito na yon. That was what we're talking about basically, is the three world model. They were grouped all of these world's countries into three groups, the first, second, and the third world countries. So this stratification of the countries was initially based on the basis of political ideology affiliation. So it was firstly, sabi pala, basically on the political ideology affiliation aside from the economic status. So the first world countries were identified as the countries which were allied with the USA. Okay? With the USA. Second world countries were countries which were allied with the Soviet Union. Okay, so by these allies only, you would see and you would have a hint of the political ideology affiliation of these countries. And third world countries which supported neither, okay, neither the Soviet Union nor the United States. Ito yung mga neutral na countries na third world. That's why, again, they were categorized as third world countries based on the political ideology. Okay, moving on. The first world concept was first looked onto the 20th century when the world was immersed in the Cold War again. It was the collective term for the countries which were under the capitalistic umbrella. Yes, of course, because they have the money. So the United States and the Soviet Union, which has divided the world into blocks in their respective guests to become most powerful country in the world. And here, the term was introduced by the UN in 1940s and was used through the Cold War period, where it was propagated by the then global superpowers. Can you imagine that? They are the superpowers. Okay? Aren't you afraid of that term, that they are the superpowers and we are not? Okay, don't worry. The category was coined and was differently coined these days, and we are not branded as a third world country, but a developing country. So during this period, first world countries were identified as countries which were allies of the US, which were economically stable and shared common socio-political beliefs with the US. Again, the first world countries were characterized by relatively political and economic stability and also had a capitalistic economic system. So, as a description a while ago, and the first world countries were initially majority of the countries in the Europe, US, and Canada. During the peak of the Cold War, relations between first world countries and the second world countries were frosty, with the Soviet Union and the United States being the core of the two factions. The first world concept after the Cold War. So there could be a transition, there could be a change. Okay. The concept of the First World enjoyed much power during the Cold War, with the United States manipulating much influence in the international affairs among First World countries. Okay, can you still say so that that the U.S. is manipulative of the influence at this point in time, during the present time? Can you say that U.S. at this time, at this present time, is still in the manipulative influence in the international affairs? Okay, reserve your answer later on. This particular time, they are in their election period, and most of the time, and almost most of the time, that's when a country is in a political, I mean, in
Yes
an
po.
election period, electoral period. Yes, of course, these conflicts will surely and will arise because of the different agenda of the different candidates, and that's why there are actually facts that during the election period, there could be a swing economic status for any country, for that matter. Okay, so let's continue and let's see if uh, we are correct in
Okay
saying
po.
that. Yes, thank you. So the United States even took far-reaching measures to ensure that neighboring countries which were allied to the Second World, such as Cuba, were blocked through heavy economic sanctions. However, the Eastern Bloc collapse witnessed in 1991 signified the end of the Cold War, and with it, a traditional definition of first world countries. So sabi nga, nagkaroon ng transition, no? That the category of the first world country was not used, and the term first world is rarely used in recent years as a division or contrast of countries of the world based on their affiliation to the United States, but is often used to describe countries with economic and political stability regardless of affiliation. Okay, so as far as I know, no, probably due to can we say, even if the humanitarian reason, it's really hard to be categorized if you came from a third world country then, and you are probably living in a first world country, probably if you migrated to a first world country, and how could the how would you be able to adapt with the cultural diversity because you are coined as coming from a third world country. So it could be a stigma for a person, and it could be really um it's really hard when it's really hard for us to be with the first world countries, citizens of the first world countries, if you came from, well, the poor country nga, di ba? So that's why I think aside from that, no, um, aside from any more reasons, the term first world is really used in the recent years because it talks about division, it talks about contrast of the countries based on the affiliation, wherein, well, the global goal is basically for the unity. Okay, the second world, only we thought of the first and the third, right? But there's really a second world country. The second world was term used to describe several industrial countries which were affiliated to Soviet Union and China during the Cold War period. So if you think of Soviet Union and China, so what would you think? So, ibig sabihin, according to the definition, the majority of these countries either practice a socialistic system of the government or a communist system of the government. Meaning, if if you practice this, then you fall under the second world. Then, so the countries included all countries under the Soviet Union, China, North Korea, Cuba, Vietnam, and Laos. Germany was particularly notable as a country that was divided into two, with the East Germany being established as a second world country, while West Germany as a first world country. Because we all know that, have you heard of the Berlin Wall? So can you research on the division of the East and the West Germany then? That these two were of different category. One is a first world country, that's the West Germany, and East Germany being um, under the communist system is in the second world list of countries. So the division was manifested in the nation's capital, Berlin, which had fortified wall built through it to separate the two countries. So as I was saying, there was this Berlin Wall that divides the East and the West Germany, right? And the Soviet Union was the at the heart of the second world and influenced the international affairs among the member countries. The Soviet Union assisted other Second World countries as seen in the Molotov Plan in the 1940s when the Soviet Union provided aid to its allied countries as an alternative to American aid. So, di ba napaka-interesting ng mga 1940s pala, no? Talagang they were, parang they would obviously support each other's allies, no? So after the Cold War, there was a collapse of the Eastern Bloc in the 20th century, and this definition was deemed to be obsolete. So again, if the first world term was not used now, just like the Second World term, it collapsed and signaled the end of the Cold War. While the Second World concept is still currently used, but rarely, a term is used to define former communist countries with developing economies and is only used for an economic perspective and not as a political ideology. So, third world. So, kasama ba tayo sa third world class? Definitely, we are under the third world country list. The third world was originally the term used to define the countries that were neither first world countries nor the second or non-aligned movement. The term third world was first penned in 1952 by a French economist and historian who defined third world countries as countries that were neither West countries nor members of the Soviet Federation. But definitely, the third world countries were predominantly found in South America, Africa, Oceania, and Asia, which the Philippines belong. So some countries seem to be classified as both second and third. For instance, Cuba. Due to the impoverished economic situation in these countries, the term third world increasingly became associated with the countries with low GDP and where the majority of citizens live in miserable poverty. So, madaling i-describe kung anong country ang third world, which is only basically on the low GDP and who does not meet the basic needs, while the first world country, di ba, has enough basic needs. There were European countries which were neither capitalistic inclined nor Soviet affiliated, such as Sweden, Finland, Ireland, Switzerland, and Austria, had prosperous economies, were all around developed, and were commonly known as neutral countries. So basically, nung una talaga, it depends on status and affiliation, no? How they were categorized as first, second, and third. But there are also neutral countries. But the way if you will view if you will research on the GDP and how they live, the status of living there, like Sweden, Finland, Ireland, and Switzerland and Austria, most likely if they were not neutral countries, they belong to the first world countries, right? So the third world in the modern news, sabi nga natin, no, parang it's really hurtful if you say that Philippines, third world country, parang it's so hurting on our part, for example. That's why in the modern in the modern era, after the collapse of the Eastern Bloc in the 20th century, which also signaled the end of the Cold War, meant that the definition of the third world countries had to change as the global political landscape had suddenly changed. So during this period, the countries under the third world was primarily defined by the economic status instead of political ideology. So, due to the original stereotype associated with the third world countries, these countries were identified as the countries with poor but developing countries. So, para hindi naman masyadong hurtful, um, they they attach the terms developing economies instead of saying the third world country being poor countries. So, the majority of the third world countries in Asia, Oceania, South America, and Africa were originally colonies of European colonial authorities which had gained independence in the 20th century. Okay, and due to increased criticism, again, the use of the term third world countries economies instead refer these countries either as developing countries or least developed countries. Okay, so at least there's hope. If you say it is you belong to the developing countries, no, instead of the third world countries, which says that poor country. So ano bang ang mga relationship? And later on, I will be viewing you a very short clip, no? Um, um, concluding or summarizing these slides, modern relations in first, second, and third world countries as a stratification of the world's countries into the three categories, first, second, and third, was received much criticism. Ito na yun, diba? The majority of the countries which were originally first world countries established by North Atlantic Treaty Organization, an intergovernmental military alliance. In recent years, globalization and increased technological advancements have seen a decreased alienation of countries in the world. Okay, so everything is being transformed and progressed. Many countries which were initially seen as third world countries have also, in recent years, experienced increased growth in their respective economies and have ceased being identified as developing countries. So, as what I am saying, the third world countries uh, has progressed, had progress already, and from the term third world countries, they were now identified as developing countries because of the increased growth in their respective economies. So, today, the powerful economies in the West are still sometimes described as the first world. Of course, well, the superpowers still are enjoying the term first world because of the pride that they have because of their economic status. However, the second world has become largely obsolete following the collapse of the Soviet Union. So the term second world is not used today. The third world remains the most common of the most original designation, but its meaning has changed from non-aligned and become more of a blanket term for developing world. Okay, and the third world label is now outdated. Okay, if somebody is telling you that, hey, you came from the Philippines, from the third world country, so that's bullying already because the term third world is outdated and the term has been replaced uh, by no, a positive terms like developing country. The terms such as developing countries and lower middle income are now often used in its place. Okay. So now, if I would ask you, if you wouldn't be called the Philippines is not a third world country now, can we now say that we are a developing country or low income country or lower middle income country? How would you label Philippines now? Developing country,
Developing country.
low income country,
Developing countries.
lower middle income country.
Developing
Developing
countries.
countries.
Yeah,
Developing.
yes, we are under this category now. Okay. So let me just view this short video clip which I got from YouTube, and I think this one is from the slides and from the solid slides that you saw a while ago. Let's just see this short clip that summarizes our discussion a while ago. Can you hear the audio?
Medyo po.
Yes
Yes
po.
po.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. So that's the end of our discussion for today. So for your assignment, you will please take note of the 2 points. I mean the third point, because we have discussed points 1 and 2. And then for number 3, you will please try to find out the relationship with the third world in the 21st century.